Hi everyone and welcome. Today's video is about Cleric spells. This video is going to be a bit longer than others video because there are a lot of spells and some of them need detailed explanation on their mechanics. And of course I'm going to try to show some Cleric actions, as the previous video have been a bit too theoretical to my taste, and it's time to show how spells work and interact with each other in this video. So let's get into it. First spell I want to talk about is Lance of Faith. Lance of Faith is actually a good DPS at will. The divinity generation from this at will is average. It's a bit inferior actually to most other at wills, but actually if you use it in combination with Brand of the Sun, sorry, you are going to do a lot more DPS than with other at wills. Like there's other base damage at Sacred Flame or Astral Seal, which is not a DPS at will at all. We'll talk about that later. But it has a high damage per second value, and if you cast Brand of the Sun once and wait for it to expire because Brand of the Sun does not stack with itself, well, you are going to do quite a lot of damage as a cleric. So this is actually fairly simple, and I don't think it's an at will you should use in most circumstances due to lower divinity generation, but it's something to keep in mind if you want to play DPS. The next at will I want to talk about is Astral Seal. Astral Seal is actually very good at will, however it's also extremely situational. It's actually the only healing at will we have. It's going to trigger a moderate amount of healing every 4 seconds. It's actually good to trigger effects like cleanse to clean damage over time on your allies or on yourself or on your pets. Maybe it's also a possibility. And actually it's also good for small healing if your party doesn't exactly meet the requirements in terms of lifesteal. You're probably going to start with Astral Seal as a heal, because you may not want to slot a healing encounter. Your encounters should be for buffs, most likely. If you play a buff cleric, you should try to keep buffs as much as you can in your encounters, and well, you are going to lose quite a lot of divinity generation using Astral Seal, but it's still better than using spells like Bastion or even spells like Healing Word. So now let's talk about Sunburst. Sunburst is actually in a weird state. Not going to say it's a good PvE spell. There are opportunities to use it, because, well, in normal mode, okay, in normal mode it's not good because it's like knockback. It's not going to knock back these dummies, but it is going to knock back NPCs in dungeon, and, well, players are going to be extremely mad at you because you are going to mess up their rotation and you are going to push NPCs out of their ground targeted AoE, like Icy Terrain for Control Wizard, for instance, and, well, these spells may be extremely important in other players' rotation and you do not want to push NPCs around. This is generally a bad idea. There are maybe a few opportunities to push NPCs off a cliff, but honestly you shouldn't try that. This isn't a good idea. Stuff dies fast currently in group content, so you should not be using that. Even in solo content, this is not a good idea in any way. However, one of the good things of this spell is that in Divinity mode it triggers a damage over time, and damage over time triggers Barrier Sin. So if you have a build in which you cannot use feats like Fire of the Gods, because you don't have high enough crit, or because, well, you didn't pick the feat itself, well, you can trigger Barrier Sins using actually Divine mod Sunburst, but it's extremely risky, so be careful. Yeah, see, there's a dot. Be extremely careful because you're always at risk of messing up your rotation and using normal Sunburst, and then, well, people are not going to be happy at all, and you may even be kicked from the dungeon if you do it too often. So this is generally a bad idea because, well, it's a drama-inducing spell if you use it wrongly in group content, so be careful, be extremely careful when you use it. The next spell I want to talk about is Guardian of Faith. Guardian of Faith is actually one of the spells that is good but not required in the current group content because healing is in general not required at all. It's actually a decent heal. It may heal allies for maybe a third of the health if it crits, and if you're using a Vorpal, maybe more. That's well, maybe more if you're faithful or virtuous. That's definitely possible. But if you are looking for heal, first there are much better options, and there are also much better daily spells to use as a cleric. So it's not ideal to use, but if group content was much more challenging and required much more healing, that would be a good spell, because actually one of the good things about this spell is that first the radius is enormous. Let's show the radius of the spell. It's about this, yeah, it's about this around your target, of course. So if I casted it on this dummy, it would be about that size, which is fantastic, honestly. And well, it has no target cap. You can heal 50 people if you want. That's not a problem. However, you are not going to use it very often because, well, there aren't raid with that many people in the first place. Maybe in Tiamat, but again, in Tiamat, you're not going to use that because, well, they don't need heal. The DPS players have so much lifesteal in general and access to so much survivability that they don't need heals, and tank players are either immortal because they are damage immune, or they can heal themselves very easily with simple spells, very easily accessible encounters, or very easily accessible daily spells. So they would not make sense in general in group content. That being said, it's not a bad spell in theory, even if it's not used a lot. It's just that the game does not require such spells currently with the current group content design. So now let's talk about Healer's Law. Healer's Law is, well, it does what the tooltip says, so you are not going to need any special explanation about this. It's something you should use as a healer if you're healing. That's about it. Now let's talk about one of the... Well, let's talk about a bit more about heals, and let's start with the bad one, which is Healing Word. Healing Word is actually one of the strongest heal if you are empowering it. However, Divinity mode is useless because it's temporary hit points, and one of the problems with this spell is that it's a cylinder and the AoE is extremely small. Let's just imagine that we were in a boss fight. The boss is the trait or the pillar here, and there's a Trickster Rogue. You want to use the Trickster Rogue because he took a bad hit from the boss, but the Trickster Rogue, of course, is not going to stay near the boss. He's going to dodge. So, of course, since dodge would put it about here, it's a rogue. Well, he's going to be outside of your AoE, so you must either anticipate, which is not exactly the easiest thing to do because you don't know in which direction he's going to dodge, or you are going to miss it, plain and simple, which is bad because if you're healing, you don't want to miss player because the spell sucks. Well, so if you're healing, you should not use that in general, unless you are healing in heroic encounters. If you want to score on healing, that's a possibility. You don't really care where you cast it. Yeah, that's not bad in that case, but it's really extremely situational, and even if it's our strongest heal in our empowered man, you should not use that in general. That's just better options. So now let's talk about the good healing spell. Actually, this spell is, well, the total area it covers is about the same, but first, this spell offers visual feedback to DPS players or to the tank. You see that there's a glowing yellow area to show where you are going to heal in half a second, so it means it's a message you send to other players. Okay, I'm going to heal here, you can stay here and you're going to get heals. So one of the problems with cleric spells is that we are support, and the problem is that not many spells offer visual feedback. If, for instance, I'm healing with Divine Glow, players are not going to see where I'm targeting it. That's a problem. This is a big problem because players are going to dodge. They don't know exactly when you're going to cast it, when it's off cooldown, where you are going to cast it, so they can't really adapt. With spells like Bastion, it's really a pity that more spells are designed like that, because visual feedback is actually extremely important for the players. They have other things to do than watching where you are and what you're doing, honestly. So some group content is pretty taxing, and sometimes it's extremely demanding, and they don't have unlimited attention, and they must focus on doing damage, on the rotation, on not messing up with what other players are doing, and looking at what the cleric is doing and where he's standing, and remembering the cooldown on his spells is not a priority. So This is why actually it's a good spell. It's also a good heal in general because it's going to heal quite a lot in even in Divine Mode. Even if it's weaker in Divine Mode, it's going to heal quite a lot. So that's enough for most group content if you are going to heal. However, like I've said, healing is generally not required in group content unless your group is terrible. You're going to use this in random groups, maybe if you use a random queue, but in general in good parties you're not going to use that because it's not required. Players are just going to hit things and lifesteal is going to be triggered and they're going to be healed for more than the total its points. This is silly. But it's the current state of the game and we currently are not healer. We are buffers and general support character in the game. So now let's talk about the next spell. The next spell is Searing Light. Searing Light suffers actually from the same problems as Bastion and Healing Word to a lesser extent. Actually, it would be an excellent spell if we had to be, especially in red, where there are multiple clerics, maybe two. It would be a good healing spell if you were DPS spec, because there's a heal associated to it, and you are going to heal for as much damage as you are doing, which is good. They heal for 100% of the damage you are doing, whereas in a 50 feet radius, the range is not big. You would not be using it for damage, but you would be a great tank healer if you could use that in group content, because even if the base damage doesn't look impressive, under buff it can be 8k isn't really impressive, but under buff it could be easily up to, I don't know, 100k, 150k damage, maybe 200k. That's not unrealistic if you're using bonding runestones and buffs and other stuff like that. It would be a fantastic tank healing spells, even in I think in Divine Mode that would be a fantastic tank healing spell, and you would be doing you would be almost be able to heal the tank for more than its total heals, so that would be great. But again, there is no group content that requires that much healing in general. Group content isn't difficult currently, even the supposedly hardcore dungeon isn't that difficult, and it doesn't take healing because, well, tanks are either immortal or healing themselves, so you don't need that. Now let's talk a bit about good daily spells. First one is Flame Strike. Flame Strike is our daily at will. There is sorry, it's our DPS daily power, and well, there's much to say about it. There's smoke knockback that doesn't really matter anyway. Well, it has the most damage of all our dailies. Damage is divided in two phases. That's about it. There's much to say about it in general. But here is one of the most important cleric spells. It's Hallowed Ground. Hallowed Ground is a fantastic buff. It's one of our best buffing spells. However, it's a daily, so you need to charge action point to use it, but some builds are built around casting such spells more often than others, and that's a possibility. There are mechanics to keep in mind when you use it. You should be keeping in mind that when you cast it, you cannot generate any action points, so it's going to be a bit difficult to cast it exactly on cooldown. You are probably, by the way, not going to be able to do that. However, there are a few tricks you can use, and one of the tricks you can use to charge this daily much faster is using Chains of Blazing Light. Chains of Blazing Light is actually a bit bugged, and for that reason it's one of the best spells we have in the game. In Divinity Mode it generates extra action points. It shouldn't, but it does, and for that reason alone it's fantastic. Yeah, I haven't done much and it's already fully charged. This is silly. Honestly, it's one of our best spells currently. It's an AoE, you are going to spread debuffs like Terrifying Insight, you are going to spread Fire of the Gods with, where is it? Yeah, Fire of the Gods if it crits, so you are going to trigger Buriosynths. You are going to trigger, to apply also stacks of High Prophet if you're using it. It's just an excellent spell for trash fighting, even for long boss fights, because in long boss fights you are going to be willing to charge your daily spells much faster than in short boss fights, because when short boss fights the boss should be dead before Hallowed Ground expires. But in long boss fights, you may want to use that too, because it's just too good in terms of action point generation, and it lets you trash quite a lot of recovery, which is not very convenient to use, because you are going to be choosing between crit and recovery, and honestly, crit is more interesting to pick as a buffer because of Fire of the God and Bear Your Sins. So it's but honestly, it's broken, and I hope it gets fixed, because it's really silly, but well, currently it's just too good to pass, and I don't like using broken things. It's honestly, I don't like either having one spell that almost never leaves my encounter bar, but it's what it is, and it's currently one of our best options, and until it's fixed, well, you should use it. The next class. Now let's talk a bit about class features. Class features are actually an extremely important part of your cleric, and well, don't overlook class feature, or don't make the wrong choice when you pick class feature. Divine Fortune is actually an excellent class feature for buffers. Why? Because it lets you generate a lot more divinity. And if you use feats like Gift of the God, which increase your divinity generation, it's even better for the divinity generation, because Fire of the God works multiplicatively with Divine Fortune, which is also completely silly, but this is how the game works currently, and well, this is interesting in some builds that struggle with buffing in general, like Anointed Champions, which aren't really built around buffing, but more about, well, supporting the party in different ways. So this is, I'll show that later, but Divine Fortune is actually something that rarely leaves my bar, even as a Divine Oracle, because I want a lot of divinity, because I want empowerment, and empowerment is life, because if you don't have enough empowerment, you are not going to be able to cast your best buff, like Break the Spirit, and Break the Spirit is extremely important in your rotation. It's your best buff. It's even better than Hallowed Ground, even if the buff is weaker. It's only 30%, Hallowed Ground is 40%, but it's your best buff because you can cast it almost on cooldown if you're lucky, or if you play properly. But the problem is that you're going to dodge. Okay, so you may not have 100% uptime on Break the Spirit, that's fine, but you should not have, like many clerics do, less than 50% of the time. Honestly, I see a lot of you when I play group content with my DPS character, and many of you have horrible uptimes on Break the Spirit. This is awful, guys. Do not do that. Instead, focus on making as much divinity as you can to cast this lovely 30% buff. It's just you're not going to achieve much as a buffer if your uptime on buffs is too low. You can buff in other ways, but many other ways are inferior to damage buffs. Why? Because damage buffs actually snowball. If you cast Break the Spirit at the same time and Hallowed Ground, both buffs are going to be much stronger together, because, well, buffs actually work multiplicatively, so your buffing is actually more effective when you cast multiple buffs, or if your party have multiple damage buffs at the same time in your group. This is something you should absolutely not overlook. I know many of you don't really like picking Divine Fortune because they think spells like Astonishing Like are better, and well, Astonishing Like is actually a good option, but it's not the best in most cases. It requires extremely specific builds, like Anointed Army spamming. If you can maybe cast a daily spell every 2 seconds, maybe that's relevant. Okay, that might be a good option, but if you can't, in most cases you won't be able to, because, well, you can do that in some cases, but it's either extremely expensive or extremely specific, and it requires a very specific team combination to be effective, and more effective than Divine Fortune. You are not going to be as good as a buffer if you don't generate enough divinity. If you use, for instance, Astonishing Light, it's going to be good if you play with, let's say, Guardian Fighter, but you're not here to buff the tank only. You are going also to be buffing classes like Great Weapon Fighters, because they don't stack a lot of recovery and have extremely long cooldown on some of their best spells. But again, if you are doing that for only 2 classes in the game, that's not optimal in general. You should not pick Astonishing Light. There are much better options especially as Divine Oracle, but also as Anointed Champion. There are better options in general, and you should not just be picking that because, well, you think they're going to do more damage. Okay, they're going to do more damage overall, their rotations are going to be shorter, but your buffs are not going to have a high uptime because you are going to lack quite a lot of divinity. The problem I see, well, I play DPS myself too, I have a control wizard, and there are not many clerics that focus on casting Break the Spirit as often as they could, and this is, honestly guys, this is wrong, this is bad, because the problem with your buff is that if you can't cast them, if you can't have a high uptime, they're weak. If you cast Break the Spirit, which is a 30% buff, maybe, and you have a 50% time, it's overall a 15% buff, and that's useless, that's not great. Okay, your DPS are going to adapt, they're going to keep maybe their stronger spells for Break the Spirit buffs, they do that, yeah, they're daily, they're going to keep their daily for that, but again, there are other spells, and some classes have very short cooldown, like, yeah, Control Wizard, or Warlocks, or Rangers, and you are going to mess up the rotation if they're waiting for you to cast Break the Spirit. So you should absolutely, as a Devoted Cleric, focus, as a buffer Devoted Cleric, focus on casting Break the Spirit as much as you can, and for that you need a lot of divinity, which is why there are not many good opportunities to replace Vivid Fortune, and if you are looking for pure optimization, you should not overlook the spell at all, because it's just too good to pass, and divinity is life as a cleric, as a buffer. You are not going to be able to be a good buffer if you don't have enough divinity. You are going to have to focus on casting your strongest buff, and your strongest buff is this one. So now let's talk a bit about some useless class features. This is one of them. I know some people recommend it sometimes in random groups, but honestly, if you dodge, you are not going to die anyway, so you should dodge instead of slotting that, because while you kind of need good class features if you are looking to carry a random group anyway, so you should not use that. Even if the tank is bad, you should not. No, that's not a good idea in general. Now let's talk about another good but useless this time. Good but useless class feature, Foresight. Foresight increases damage resistance on your allies if you heal them. There's no target cap to this. Even you are going to apply it to members that aren't in your party, like many cleric buffs. It works for most buffs. You are going to apply buff regardless of party composition, if people are in your party. And that's a good thing to remember about your cleric. You are going to be able to cast it on a lot of allies if you are in reds, but, well, it's not required because, well, the current group content is as designed as, well, NPCs are either going to one-shot players and doing 200k, 300k hits, or they are going to not do a lot of damage. So players are going to be either die in one shot if they don't have high enough mitigation themselves, or they are going to heal themselves with lifesteal. So that's useless. You know, there's not many good reasons to use that currently. Maybe in PvP that could be interesting. Yeah, in PvP that's a good option, but you should not use that in PvE in general. That's not a good idea. So now let's talk about another class feature. Since we are talking about class feature, we are going to talk about Holy Fervor. Holy Fervor is a good class feature, but again, it's not the best. It's good if you are looking to build a pure divine power, daily power spamming cleric. That's okay, but there aren't many builds that allow you to generate as much action point as you should to be a good daily power spamming cleric, because, well, it's expensive. It requires extremely expensive items like the snail. It requires very specific weapon set. It requires very specific builds that are focused on generating action points for yourself, and in general it's not going to work very well in most group content because, well, NPCs die fast, and, well, your daily power are good, but again, you need to hit stuff to generate action points, and if you don't have a lot of NPCs to hit, well, you're not going to generate a lot of action points. So this is quite difficult to justify currently in the current group content to make a daily spamming cleric. I don't think that's completely optimal, especially if you play Divine Oracle. There's no your downtime on Alone is going to be shorter already due to change. So don't think this is currently a good option. Maybe later it's not a bad class feature, but there are better options in general, and there are better ways to buff, because Divinity Generation Clerics don't focus again on Break the Spirit, which is sad because they're losing a 30% buff with a crappy uptime, and that's bad. That's bad. Yeah, you can cast as many Hallowed Ground or Anointed Army as you want, but if you don't cast Break the Spirit, well, you're not as useful as you could be. It's one of the strongest buff. There's no good reason not to use not to use Divine Fortune. That's again difficult to find replacement for that. That's possible, but it's not exactly obvious, and it's not the most common build. So now let's talk a bit about the best Divine Oracle, and maybe the best buffing cleric class feature. Yeah, it's the best. No, there's no doubt about it. It's something that should never leave you your spell by. It's Terrifying Insight. It's a 8% debuff on NPCs. This has a visual bug, I think. I don't know. With Chains of Blazing Light, you can get up to 6, 7, 8 stacks if you want. I don't know if it buffs more. I didn't test it, so I don't think it really matters anyway. But you are going to apply it by just playing the game and doing stuff in your team. You are going to apply it almost passively. If you even if you use at will, that's going to work. You're going to apply quite many stacks of it. Yeah, we're already at 4. And yeah, we can. 7. Yeah, we are at 7 now. 8. Oh, 8. That's good. But okay, it's actually extremely easy to apply. It's almost passive. I'm not saying you don't have to do anything. You do. But if you play the game normally, you should have no trouble applying it with max stacks on cooldown almost. It lasts quite long. It doesn't last very long, but yeah, let's take a look actually. That's a good thing to show in a video. Okay, we're at max stacks. Now let's see how long it lasts. Yeah, it expires. It lasts long enough so that you can apply it with chains, or if you're in a boss fight with Break the Spirit, maybe, yeah, so that shouldn't be a problem. You should be at max stacks most of the time on big NPCs or bosses. That's not a problem. Now let's talk a bit about at wills. One of the best at wills for buffers is Sacred Flame. Why? Because Sacred Flame has a fast animation, and it's going to generate more divinity than other cleric at wills. Let's show that. Let's wait a bit of divinity, and yeah, you are going to generate divinity pretty fast, especially as a Divine Oracle if you use it in combination with Brand of the Sun. Brand of the Sun, well, it doesn't stack with itself, I think I've said it already, but it has the shortest animation of all cleric at wills, and which means that you are, in most of the cases, going to be able to grid more divinity on dying NPCs. And if you cast it on 2 NPCs in a group of NPCs, you are going to generate quite a lot of divinity in a very short amount of time. And if you combine that with Sacred Flame, because you can cast Sacred Flame once NPCs are debuffed with Brand of the Sun, you are going to actually generate divinity extremely fast, which means that you are going to be able to cast spells like Break the Spirit much faster. And it's going to increase your uptime tremendously on buffs, which is again very, very important if you are looking for buffing. If you are looking for buffing, you are looking to cast Break the Spirit as much as you can and maintain a very high uptime. Now there's something I want to show you about Brand of the Sun, which is a nice trick you're going to be able to use in group content in general. Because, well, the fast casting animation allows to do some interesting thing, and there's a good mechanic I want to show you about Brand of the Sun. Okay, wolves. That's going to be okay. Let's almost kill the wolf. Die. Now I'm going to cast this. Okay, the wolf died. Oh, I didn't waste divinity. That's bad because I can't see divinity in the region right now. That was a bad idea. So I'm going to have to kill the wolf and then waste some divinity. Okay, don't die from dots, please don't die. Stay alive, I need you. Okay, the wolf is going to die and I am still generating divinity. Even if NPCs die, you are going to get the full benefits of Brand of the Sun Divinity's generation, which is honestly great because it lets you refill your divinity bar to let you charge empowerment before you start the next encounter in dungeons, and that's great. You should cast that on dying NPCs if they are dying because that lets you get a lot of divinity for your next encounter. That's just great in general. It's an excellent at will for buffing, and which is why, in my opinion, Anointed Champion is severely it's severely gamed. If you want to buff, you don't have access to Brand of the Sun, which is a handicap if you are a buffer. That's one of the good reasons why Divine Oracle is greatly superior in terms of buffing. I know not many of you play Divine Oracle currently because, well, Anointed Champion is easy when you play. It's easier to play with suckers because you have access to Anointed Army, and Anointed Army is good to play with suckers. But again, you're missing on Brand of the Sun, and it's a fantastic at will to generate divinity. So, well, Break the Spirit is going to suffer from this Paragon choice. So, we'll talk about that later. That's not today's topic anyway. So, now let's talk a bit about another buff. It's weaker than Break the Spirit, but it's still okay. It's Forge Master Flame. Forge Master Flames has one drawback. The buff is twice weaker as Break the Spirit, but it's still a damage buff, which means that it still benefits from the snowballs effect like Arrow Ground and Break the Spirit do. And even if it's a lesser option, you are going to use it sometimes in group content because, well, there are two good opportunities to use it. First, it's reds, because in reds in general you're going to have maybe 2, 3, 4 clerics sometimes in Tiamat, and some of them are maybe going to cast Break the Spirit and they're going to have a good uptime because yes, some clerics do know how to play their class and they're going to cast Break the Spirit with a very high uptime, and you are not going to be able to cast Break the Spirit too because it does not stack with itself. So you are going to use Forge Master Flame instead. Yeah, sorry for the little taunting. That's not nice. Okay, I won't do it again. Well, you are going to use Forge Master Flame, and even if it's a lesser buff, it's still a buff and it's a better option than nothing at all. So it's a 15% buff, and you are going to be able to increase your red's damage overall, and that's a good thing. There's also a good way to use it. It's if you want to build a empowerment stack as fast as you can. Well, this is the fastest casting animation we have as a cleric. The casting animation is the shortest of any cleric spell. So if you want to build empowerment stack in less than half a second, then you are going to use it. I don't know if there are many good opportunities to use it, but to use that setup, but it's actually a good buffing option. That's a decent buffing rotation if you are going to be willing to cast Break the Spirit as fast as you can, and if you can't, for some reason, charge it before by using Divine Mode, Divine Glow. Yeah, that's a possibility. It's not bad if you want. It's also a decent DPS spell. Yeah, it does as much damage as this one, but if you're looking for single target DPS, you're going to use that one too because it's good in general. That's also a good PvP spell, but it's not today's topic, so let's talk instead about buffing spells, PvE buffing spells. And actually this is quite a good spell. Prophecy of Doom is a good debuff. It's a 12.5% debuff, and well, it's not going to fulfill all its promises because, well, there are a lot of special effects that should be applied when you use it, but most of them do not work. The debuff works, that's fine, but, well, most of the things do not work on it, and, well, it's still a good debuff because 12.5 is quite important actually. It's as much as Divine Glow, so you should not overlook it. And, well, it has several drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is the casting animation. It's quite long. It's a bit longer than Divine Glow, but Again, if you are looking for maximum amount of buff, you are going to slot that one on your encounters bars because, well, first there aren't many good options, and you may be running out of. You won't probably have enough divinity to cast the Forge Master Flame and Break the Spirit at the same time in your party. So you should be looking for options that do not require empowerment. In empowerment mode, it's a stronger debuff, but you are going to be in trouble to cast this one in empowered mode, and it's inferior to Break the Spirit. So we're just going to use it in normal mode, and it's a good spell if the boss fight is short, which means that you don't need to charge your action point fast with Chain of Blazing. Like if the boss fight lasts 15-20 seconds, you are going to switch to this instead of if it's a boss with several phases, and well, you can't, like in, I don't know, Castle Never. Yeah, the boss disappears sometimes, and you are going to be able to use that because, well, the boss disappears and you are going to be able to charge your action point while the boss is doing gods know what, I don't know. But it's not here, so that's a good option if boss have several phases, or like the turtle in Fangbreaker's Island. This is a good spell to use there. It's a debuff and your team is going to be able to burn the boss to trigger phases much sooner. That's a good option. So now let's talk about I think I have forgotten something, or maybe I'll remember that later. Okay, let's talk about Daunting Like. Daunting Like is a DPS encounter. You're going to use it if you play DPS or if you play solo content. That's a good spell in general. There isn't much to say about it, except the fact that you can cancel its animation and still do damage, which is a bit broken, but well, you're not going to need that feature anyway very often because it's not required. So now let's talk about one of the not so useful daily spells, which is Divine Armor. Divine Armor used to be okay as a spell because it used to give a quite significant amount of temporary point, but it doesn't anymore. So it was now only one good side. See where I cast it is going to stop near the pillar here. Let's cast it, okay. The buff is applied on me. And I can walk around with the damage resistant buff, but the problem is, okay, it's a damage resistant buff, it's nice, it's strong, but Hallowed Ground has about the same damage resistant, and it also offers a damage buff, which you should be looking for in most of the cases, because, well, there aren't many opportunities to use Divine Armor. There aren't many fights in which mobility is critical and happening in a very large area. And honestly, it's hard to justify to just pick damage resistance when you can have damage resistance plus buff. That's generally not a good idea in group content in general. So you're not going to use that very often. Okay, temporary hit points are nice here, but only because I'm wearing High Prophet, which means low hit points. If you have standard armor, you're not going to see a big amount of temporary hit points, which is bad because, well, that makes these spells almost useless. So now let's talk about Divine Glow. Divine Glow is, well, it's a good spell, but in my opinion it's a bit overrated by many clerics and not used for what it is. It's a good, it buffs and debuffs targets. It's going to buff for, let's check the value, not sure exactly. Yeah, buff value is 12.5, yes, 12.5, and the debuff value is also damage resist debuff. Yeah, 12.5, so it's as strong as normal Prophecy of Doom, but one of the problem with this spell is that I see many clerics using this in Divine mode. Because, okay, it offers a buff in Divine mode, but the casting animation is extremely slow, which means that, okay, you are buffing a bit, but you could buff more with Break the Spirit. That's the problem with this spell. If you use it in Divine mode, you are going to significantly drop your uptime on Break the Spirit, and you should in general not use it in Divine mode because that's a waste of time, and there are better ways to buff than Divine mode, Divine Glow. Break the Spirit is a buff you want to keep up as much as you can, so you can use it in normal mode, that's not a problem. So that's actually a good spell. In typical rotation, you are going to use it last, not because you want to, but because actually it offers a small heal, and, well, it's not a bad idea in general to heal your tank a bit, even if it doesn't really need that. That's just a... well, it's a good spell in general, but don't use it wisely. I mean, it's not meant to be spammed in Divine mode because animation is slow, and slow animations means you need more time to make empowerment, and empowerment is, well, the way you buff, so be careful when you do that. Now let's talk a bit about Astral Shield. Astral Shield is an excellent spell. It's a great encounter, well, for a reason I have mentioned already, like Hallowed Ground, like Bastion. It offers great visual feedback, but in the current group content there are very many little opportunities to use that. There are many opportunities to use this spell. It's good damage resistance. If your tank is absolutely awful and has wrong stat distribution, yeah, you may be using that in random queues, but again, if you're playing with a decent group, you're not going to use that spell most of the time because, well, it's a good spell, but they don't need protection because they are going to be one-shot by NPCs, or NPCs are not going to be doing enough damage to kill before lifesteal procs, and, well, that's how the game works currently. It's a 40% damage resistance increase, which is really excellent, and in PvP, it's fantastic because in empowered mode it's going to shield yourself and your allies for a portion of your total hit points, and you are going to stop pretty much any incoming damage. And if you have a paladin lowering your cooldown on this, you are going to have it up 100% uptime, and this is awful for the rest of the players. This is just broken in PvP, it's just too strong, and in PvE it's strong, but it's not completely broken because, well, NPCs may hit for quite a lot, and no, it's fine in PvE, but again, it's not needed, so you're not going to use it in most of the group content. So now let's talk about a bad daily spell. So there's no good reason to use that. Even if you are generating a bit of action point, you should be using, if you are DPS, you should be using Flame Strike, and if you are playing PvP, well, the control resist isn't going to last long enough to be meaningful, so it is pretty much useless. It used to do a lot of damage, but it's been nerfed because, well, it let Cleric kill people in PvP, and apparently this is not acceptable according to the devs. So here it is, now it's bad and damage is pitiful, and you should not be using it anyway. So now let's talk a bit about, well, something that is even worse. Prophetic action. Honestly, it's awful. I don't know what the designers had in mind when they made this spell, and they probably were thinking about another game that isn't Neverwinter because, well, it's it's awful. I mean, you are going to stop damage once every 30 seconds, but you are going to take a lot more damage than that and more often than that, so I don't see the point in using that, honestly. There's no content that... If there's no content that does not damage as often as that, no, that doesn't make any sense. And anyway, you are supposed to be supporting your team, not protecting yourself with your class features, so generally better options. Now let's talk a bit about a spell I'm not going to talk about right now, which is Light of the Divinity. Light of the Divinity, well, it looks underwhelming, and as it is, well, it's not good, but there is one way to make it interesting, and I'm not going to talk about that right now because, well, I'd rather talk about it in the Anointed Champion video because it's where it shines in general. So let's keep a bit of mystery for the next video. Now let's talk a bit about Warding Flare. Warding Flare is actually, in theory, it's a good spell. Okay, it's going to be shielding your allies for 500% of your weapon damage. How much do I have currently? I have... yeah, it's going to shield ally for quite a lot of incoming damage. Yeah, that's not bad. 5 times. That's 5k per hit. I think. Yeah, it's not per second. I don't know. Let's check. Honestly, I haven't used it in a while, so yeah, it's shielding ally for about 5-6k damage. That's good. But the problem is that you can also stack it with the Divinity, so that's a lot more. But the problem is that there is no group content that is challenging enough to require it. It's like it suffers the same problem as Astral Shield, because, well, Astral Shield in open mode, first it's going to be much stronger. But Warding Flame is strong in theory too, and, well, there's no group content using sustained damage as its main form of damage, as this would be too challenging, and apparently, well, we are not going to get any challenging content anytime soon, because, well, I don't know why, honestly, I'm not sure, but there's no... I mean, if there were, let's say, encounters with lots of NPCs having lots of hit points, doing a lot of sustained damage, you would be using that, because, well, lifesteal wouldn't be able to heal your allies in time, and your tank would be dying in no time if he wasn't protected and shielded from damage. But there's no encounters in this game currently doing that. Well, there's maybe 3-4 encounters in dungeons having that kind of things, but it's honestly not worth using even in that case, because first, Astral Shield is a better option, and if you are alone in your team, you are going to use that. So that would require a red with sustained damage, a red encounter with sustained damage, because, well, one Cleric would be using that, and the second would be using one Flare. Astral Shield and one Flare would stack, 2 Astral Shield wouldn't. So you will be able to shield your allies for a lot more, but again, there is no group content with challenging encounters doing sustained damage. That does not exist currently, so it's one of the good spells in theory, but it's not used because, well, there's no content design around that. Group, sadly, I'm not going to rant about Triptych, but it's a bit sad that the devs don't realize that 300k hits are not challenging in the game. I mean, look at Thronebreaker's Island. Giants are going to hit for 300k, 400k, once in a while, maybe once every 10 seconds, once every 5 seconds, I'm not sure exactly, I don't take that much hits, but it's not challenging because players can move out of the way, avoid hits, and it makes things extremely trivial. If NPCs were, I don't know, range, or like, I don't know, we have fire icons doing a lot of damage to a party, and if they had a lot of hit points, because, well, stuff is pretty fast in the game currently, well, that would be a lot more challenging as encounters, and it would require mitigation from clerics, and it would require healing, because lifesteal would be completely... well, that wouldn't be enough to heal the player, because they would be taking a lot of damage. But encounters currently are mostly designed around, well, some big hits, and that's about it, which makes the game trivial in general. So that's sad in my opinion, but... and it's a problem also because we are not going to... the devs don't make us use all the tools we have at our disposal. There are fantastic mechanics in these games that are never used because, well, dungeons are all the same and there's a copy pasta from one another, and this is, honestly, this is very sad. I mean, the game is still fun, still enjoyable, but we could use more diversity in our group content. That wouldn't be a bad thing. And this leads us to one of the spells that suffer from the same issue, which is Geese, because Geese would actually require a boss fight in which you want to stun a big ad that isn't control immune. I mean, if you know one fight that has that kind of encounters, let me know. No, because there is none currently. There's no boss fight. Ads are almost extinct, which is sad because, well, that's fun sometimes to have a big ad doing special stuff. And we could be able to stun the ad if he had a lot of hit points, too many to deal with right now. We would be able to stun the ad and let it rot in a corner until the boss is dead. That would be a good opportunity to use Geese, but currently no encounters are designed around that. This is sad. But that's a fact, that's another unused mechanic because, well, all dungeons are the same. So, okay, let's try to end this on a positive note instead. So, overall, let's just sum up things. As a cleric, you should build your encounters. You should pick your encounters depending on the kind of content you are playing. You are not going to use, for instance, Chains of Bleeding like in some boss fight because some bosses die very fast and you can make them die even faster with Prophecy of Doom. However, you are not going to use spells like Daunting like in group content because that, well, the AoE is larger. You are going to debuff more NPCs with that, when you trigger more, when you want to trigger, let's say, Terrifying Insight or Fire of the God. You are going to use Chains instead because, well, it's just better in general, so you should be careful. You are going as a cleric to have to change your encounters quite a lot, and this is good because not all classes have access to such a variety of spells, even if there are some spells that are not needed currently. There are a few bad cleric spells, there are many. We are lucky as a class in general. That's a good thing. Maybe 3 spells that are really completely useless. Armor of Fate is one of them, Prophetic Action is useless, and Seuss. But honestly, all other good clerics have opportunities to be used in challenging group content, in on-game group content, and this is good because not all classes have access to that, so we are playing a fantastic class honestly, and a strong class too, and this is great in general. I mean, that's nice. You could use more variety in dungeons and in dungeon design, but again, that's something that may or may not happen in the future. That's not too much of a big deal. That would be nice, but the game is still in an enjoyable state as a cleric. There are some things that you should remember, that as a cleric also you should also focus on casting this spell as much as you can. Do not pick encounters that let you not cast Break the Spirit as often as you could. This would be a mistake. As a buffer, you are going to be willing to cast your buffs on cooldown, almost on cooldown. So be careful when you pick your encounters. You are not going to be able to cast them all the time, and you are going to sometimes have to make a choice, like, well, maybe I'm not going to cast, let's say, Prophecy of Doom or Divine Glow this round, but I'm going to cast Break the Spirit sooner, so the DPS are going to have the full benefit of Break the Spirit during the next rotation. And this is something you should be extremely careful, because you should be careful about that, because, well, if you are using slow casting spells like, I don't know, Blessing of Battle, yeah, I'm going to trash talk about Unleashed Champion today, because, well, they deserve it. No, maybe they don't, but if you are using slow spells like, I don't know, Blessing of Battle, you are not going to have a fantastic uptime on Break the Spirit, and you are going to be a bad cleric in general, or at least a bad buffer. You should be focusing on providing the kind of support your party needs, and most of the time, if you play with a good team, the support your party needs is not mitigation or minor buffs like Fitted Blessing of Battle does, but you are going to have to focus on strong things, and strong things, well, there are not many, but Break the Spirit is one of them, Hallowed One is one of them, Terrifying Terrifying Insight is another. Divine Glow and Prophecy of Doom are also strong, even if they are not as strong. They're still good options as debuffs. So that's about it for today's video, and I hope you learned something. I really hope you do, because this is actually a quite long video. And thanks for watching.